And that's where the line, because it's harmful to others. I mean, and it could have cost lives. Can
you see the distinction? And it's a very important one, Rodney. We don't disagree with his right to say what he wants around the dinner table to his partner, whatever, or internally in church, or pray to the Lord Jesus Christ about what he believes. But actually, to go out there in front of hundreds of thousands of impressionable young people and to deliver his message of really
and the second time he did it,
Rodney,
knowing what the commentary had been and the warnings had been and the fact that it was harmful. And he did it knowingly.
You're giving him $50 to enable him to do that.
I'd give him more, actually, but I might give him the $100.
Is it really going to prove... Is it going to prove a win for free speech, though?
I hope so. I hope he does
$3 million, which apparently, I mean, there was one Australian employment lawyer who said that it's only going to cost him max $300,000, and you know that Israel Folau has had a footer at the bottom of his GoFundMe page that said quite clearly, I don't have to use this for legal fees. I can use it for whatever I want. So do you still want to give him $50?
I would hate to be in a situation where I'm employed by a business and they say, well, you can't say that because it might offend someone or it might lead them to self-harm or it might lead them to harm because, that's the issue. We actually have to take responsibility.
You should have seen TVNZ's social media policy, Rodney, when I worked there.
Well, I wouldn't do it. I wouldn't accept it. And it wasn't
you risked losing your job then, which he did.
Is it that important to you, Rodney? Is free speech such that...
yes.
Right, so
I'm an absolutist on free speech. And, it's that great line, isn't it? I don't agree with what you say, but I'll fight to the death for your ability to say it. Because what you have to accept is while you might feel in a majority and what you might feel confident, right, that if you enforce restrictions on free speech, what you believe in will succeed. You can imagine, for example, a theocracy or a situation where, for example, the Israel Folaus of the world run the country and they say, no, you're not allowed to go out and tell people that you're gay. No, you're not allowed to go out there and support gay rights, right? That is the point. And they could be saying, look, if you go out there and support gay rights, it'll end to people self-harming, it'll upset people, it'll cause offence. That is a thing that we have fought long and hard for, that we actually allow the other side, the people that we disagree with, to actually, say what they believe, and we actually have the argument. Now,
doesn't he have a point, Ellie? What was that? What was that great saying? If freedom of speech means nothing at all if we don't value the opinions that we absolutely despise.
Yes, and I think that
Noam Chomsky said that.
Yeah, no, I think there is value in that, but where I draw the line is at an action, a deliberate action that this man knew would be harmful to young people who look up to him. I mean, that's the effect of his exercise, of his conceptual exercise of free speech, right? Absolutely uphold that. But he knew the result of that would be harm to young people, and that's unconscionable.
We have had a heck of a lot of feedback this afternoon. Let me tell you what, it's been fantastic. Rodney Hyde, Ali Moore, I really appreciate your time.
Bye, Rodney.
Bye-bye. Take care.
Checkpoint next. See you tomorrow.
Te whakarongo mai koe ki te reo irirangi o Aotearoa. This is Checkpoint on RNZ National. I'm Lisa Owen. On tonight's programme, primary teachers say yes to their latest pay offer, but it's a no from their bosses who are holding out for more. No more sitting on the fence. MPs are just hours away from deciding whether or not to support a euthanasia bill through its second reading. So who's pulled a U-turn? The demand for security guard escorts in a hospital car park have skyrocketed following 2 earlier attacks, and victim support is about to reveal how it will hand out the last of the millions raised for Mosque shooting victims. So what's wrong with the sinkhole under the kitchen? A lot, when it belches, burps and swallows up your backyard. You can check us out on Facebook Live.
RNZ News at 5. Kia ora, ko Susana Leata tēnei. The Labour MP, Kiritapu Allen, has had a last-minute change of heart over her support for the end-of-life choice bill. David Seymour's bill allowing people who are terminally ill to choose assisted dying is due to have its second reading in Parliament this evening. Ms Allen had planned to vote for the bill, but says she changed her mind this morning.
I've considered Seymour's SOP to see whether that's something that might change my mind, but I still have concerns. Those haven't been relieved by that SOP. And so after a lot of soul searching, I've decided that I'll vote no today, but I'll keep an open mind if it does get through.
Kiri Allen says it was a very difficult decision to make. David Seymour says some MPs have changed their minds since the first reading passed by 76 votes to 44, but he's cautiously optimistic about the second reading being passed. The public service is set to undergo its biggest change in 30 years. The State Services Minister Chris Hipkins has just announced that the State Sector Act 1988 will be repealed and replaced with a new Public Service Act. Here's political reporter Charlie Drever.
Mr Hipkins says boards made up of chief executives and relevant agencies will be established to tackle the country's most pressing problems, such as child poverty, mental health services, climate change and the future of work. He says when it comes to complex challenges, it doesn't work anymore to put a single agency on the job. Mr Hipkins says the reform will make groups of chief executives jointly accountable. A public service bill will be introduced to Parliament later this year. From Parliament, ko Charlie Drever, tēnei.
Since 2 nurses were attacked after leaving work at Middlemore Hospital in February, there's been an 8-fold increase in the number of staff and visitors using security guards to escort them to their cars. The county's Manukau DHB says guards made about 4,000 trips in May, up from 500 in February. Rowan Quinn reports.
Some Middlemore staff say they're still nervous and vigilant as they leave work, despite more security being laid on. The DHB says as well as providing extra guards, it's improved lighting and trimmed back trees, and it also intends to fence off some areas of the hospital grounds. An intensive care nurse, Deborah Isaacs, says there's been a big improvement, but there's room for more. She says guards patrol a large car park and may not be able to spot trouble if they're far away. Ko Rowan Quinn, tēnei.
A 4th baby has been delivered in Lumsden before the mother could make it to a primary birthing unit elsewhere. The child was born as Parliament's Health Select Committee considered a petition to reverse last August's decision to downgrade the Southland Township's maternity centre. The MP for Clutha Southland, Hamish Walker, says that because of previous complications, the mother had planned to travel to Invercargill, more than an hour's drive away. In the event, she gave birth at Lumsden's emergency hub with the support of a second midwife. Mr Walker says it's disappointing the committee made no decision today about whether to investigate the downgrade.
As we've said all along, there'll be more babies born. What the government needs to do is reinstate full services at Lumsden Maternity Centre to give rural babies in Southland the best start at life.
Hamish Walker says the committee will reconsider the petition when it meets next month. A Kapiti Coast councillor found guilty of indecently assaulting a council staff member has lost his appeal against conviction and sentence. It is now a year since David Scott was convicted and fined $1,500. In April, his lawyer told the Court of Appeal Scott had been the victim of a miscarriage of justice because his trial lawyer failed to call expert medical evidence and made a fundamental error in asking a doctor to measure Scott's penis during his trial. However, in today's judgment, the court has found the measuring was a legitimate trial strategy and the trial judge was right to refuse Scott a discharge without conviction. The Kapiti Coast District Council says that Scott has now been removed from office. The buyer of what's thought to be the only remaining proof copy of an original Treaty of Waitangi proclamation of sovereignty says he's thrilled with the acquisition. The rare one-page document was sold for $31,000 to private collector Spencer Schooler at the Auckland Auction House Art and Object today. Mr Schooler, who has been collecting for a decade, says he considers himself a custodian.
I've also got a bilingual printing of the Treaty of Waitangi, which I lend to the Waitangi Museum, and I'll talk to them to see if they're also interested in having that piece, because I'd much rather lots of people see it than just myself.
The document was one of hundreds of items on sale from the Christopher Parr collection of printed matter from the early to mid-1800s. A Rotorua woman thought it was an earthquake when a massive bubbling mud pool appeared in her whakarewarewa backyard early today. Susan Geddy says the house shook and the earth rumbled. Then she saw the emerging geyser.
I just went straight into protective panic mode and got the little boy up and grabbed my baby and just thought, what can I frantically grab to get in the car and get out of here?
Susan Geddy ended up calling in a geothermal expert from the Rotorua Lakes Council to check out the mud formation. Though told it was safe to stay in the house overnight, she says that she's moving out because the ground beneath could also give way to the mud pool. It's 5:05. All-rounder Mitchell Santner says the Black Caps' scrappy nature has helped them so far at the Cricket World Cup. New Zealand's unbeaten run goes on the line against Pakistan in Birmingham tonight. A win would put them into the semi-finals, while Pakistan must win to stay in the playoff race. Santner says winning a couple of close ones has helped.
Being on the winning side of those tight encounters give the whole squad confidence going into each game, that you know that you've got confidence. Other people are standing up at different times and can back everyone to do a job rather than just relying on a couple of key players.
Meanwhile, it seems England fans haven't learned from taunting Shane Warne about eating all the pies. Mitchell Starc took 4 wickets in Australia's 64-run victory at Lord's last night. Starc says he was surprised to cop a jibe from an England fan while eating his breakfast, which included 3 poached eggs. England fans used to taunt Warne about his weight, only for the leg-spinning great to produce some of the best performances against their team. Silver Ferns coach Nolene Taurua hopes the All-Stars selection will be inspired to play well against her team when they meet in the first of 4 pre-World Cup matches in Auckland tonight. She says some All-Stars players were unlucky to miss out on the Ferns World Cup squad.
It's a massive opportunity for them to show themselves, and honestly an open opportunity to give it to the Silver Ferns and show their class and their worth. So hopefully the standard of their play will be as high as it can and the competition will be fierce.
Nolene Taurua. That's the news.
Bad eggs.
I hate to use the pun, but a couple of bad eggs in the industry had caused a lack of confidence.
Bad drivers.
If they're not going to spend any more money on roads, how are they going to engineer roads so that when people crash, they don't die?
Bad luck.
And so the pitches are doing a bit more, and England have shown so far that they cannot adapt.
It's all good. Morning Report with Susie Ferguson and Corin Dan, weekdays from 6.
Then on 9 to noon, Mosque attack survivors will soon hear how final donated funds will be distributed. We speak to the lawyer who's managed many of the US's highest profile disaster funds. And after 10, Australian oncologist Ranjana Srivastava on her new book, A Better Death, a reflection on the different ways death can give meaning to our lives. Join me, Catherine Ryan, on 9 to noon after Morning Report on RNZ National.
Now the short forecast from Met Service to midnight tomorrow. Northland and Coromandel Peninsula mainly fine, however a few showers in Northland spreading to Coromandel Peninsula tomorrow. For Auckland through to Wellington, including Bay of Plenty and Central High Country and Wairatapa. Fine weather, a few areas of morning and evening cloud. Gisborne and Hawke's Bay, cloudy periods and isolated showers today north of Wairoa, gradually clearing from the south with fine weather tomorrow. Fiordland and Southland, a few showers about the coasts, mainly fine inland. For the remainder of the South Island, fine for most areas, but a few areas of morning and evening low cloud or fog about valleys and basins. Chatham Islands, mostly cloudy, a few light showers until this evening. You're with RNZ National. It's coming up to 9 minutes past 5.
Thanks, Susanna. This is Checkpoint and I'm Lisa Owen. Primary and intermediate school principals are preparing to battle on alone for a better pay deal. They've rejected the latest government offer, holding out for pay parity with secondary principals and higher salaries for those at the helm of the smallest schools. But they will be campaigning without their teachers, who have voted to accept their deal. Here's our education correspondent, John Gerritsen.
Teachers and principals from primary and intermediate schools have been negotiating separate collective agreements for more than a year, but they've been campaigning together, holding 3 strikes, including one with secondary teachers. Now the teachers have accepted a deal giving them an 18.5% pay rise over 3 years, but the principals have elected to fight on. Mary Ann Roberts at Aranui School in Whanganui was one of those who voted against the offer. It would have given principals of small schools like hers a pay rise of more than 13%, but she says that won't match the pay of senior teachers with management responsibilities at big schools.
There is no motivation to take on leadership roles in small schools. The teachers' collective closes the gap even more so for small principals. There is very little between having all the responsibilities as a principal and that of someone in a leadership role in a larger school with units.
There aren't many small primary schools in Auckland, but Craig Holt from the city's Primary Principals Association says many of his colleagues also oppose the deal. He says the sticking point for them was the lack of pay parity with secondary principals.
Some principals it is about the money, but for others it's probably just around parity and knowing that their secondary colleague may be next door and a secondary school would be earning significantly more. So it's maybe just around tidying up some of those things within the system. You know, the principal's a principal, just like a teacher's a teacher, and you know, knowing that you've got parity within the system, I think is a big thing for some of those principals.
The rejected offer would have seen principals making between $87,500 and $170,000 in the first year, depending on their experience and the size of the school. The Educational Institute had recommended that principals accept the deal, but its negotiator, Louise Green, is calling on the government to come up with a better offer.
The vast majority of schools in New Zealand are smaller schools in rural areas. My plea to the government is to come back to the table with an offer that actually addresses these issues. There are less than 2,000 of us. How hard can it be to get this right for our schools in New Zealand and for principals?
The Education Minister, Chris Hipkins, says he's disappointed that primary principals have turned down a good deal. He says the government is happy to reconfigure its offer, but it will have to stay within its current value of $64 million over 3 years.
We're not putting any extra money on the table for that, and we were very, very clear about that, and we were also very clear when we went through the discussions several weeks ago that the extra money we were putting on the table for pay parity, we were doing that on the basis that that was the final deal, so you know, we'll be sticking with that.
The government has said that before and backed down, but that was in the face of an unprecedented combined strike by 50,000 primary and secondary teachers, and now primary principals look set to be on their own. Mō te hōtaka o te ahi, ko John Gerritsen tēnei.
The principal of a small rural school says she can't help but consider a return to teaching after she rejected a pay offer that would have left her making less than a senior teacher at a bigger school. Carolyn Hill is the principal of Wharepapa South School in Waikato, where there's just 27 students and 2 other teachers. She says she was earning more 2 years ago at the front of the class, yet as a principal she's carrying all the stress and responsibility of essentially being a CEO.
There are going to be teachers who are going to be paid more than principals, and that really, as a bottom line, is not it's not equitable, it's not fair, and considering the sort of roles and responsibilities with the principal, so that it is about pay, unfortunately, but it's pay versus the responsibility that we hold with the title of being a principal of a school.
Okay, well, let's talk specifics around that then.
Sure.
In your case, so you're in a relatively small school, about 23 kids, is that right?
Yeah, we're on 27 at the moment,
okay.
So we're lucky just to get over this, so we've got 2 teachers currently at the moment, and 27 kids really at the moment.
Okay, so considering the offer that's been made, if you accepted that offer, who would get paid more than you in terms of teachers?
Right, okay. So the thing to note here is that with the teaching career, you have opportunities to have units of responsibility and management units which are worth $4,000 each. Now, if I put this into a context of my own story, because I'm a first-time principal of a U1 school, so 2 years ago I was in the classroom. In fact, a year ago I was in the classroom. But 2 years ago I had been in a school for 14 years. I wasn't the DP, wasn't an AP. In fact, I was, I'd say just a teacher, but I was leading a syndicate, and I had 4 units to lead things like curriculum and maths, and I was also part of the kahuia corps and that. So having 4 units as a classroom teacher is not uncommon. Okay, that's the first thing to establish because many DPs are on 6 or 7 units. So that is, in fact, 4 units times 4 is $16,000 on top of your salary. So if we compare my story 2 years ago to what I'm getting now, I was on more as a classroom teacher than I am now as a principal. So that's as of today. Now, if we were to have accepted this offer, and the teachers obviously have, if you're actually wanting figures, it's, and I'm not, the information I'm going to give you is actually online, so it's not, I don't care sharing this. So a Scale A teacher would be on 91, close to 92, with 4 units, and this is gross, and then I'm currently on 88. So there's about 3K difference there already.
So you took a pay cut. Let's be clear about this. You took a pay cut to move into being a principal. Yeah, I did. Foolish, eh? But I did it as a career path, and because I knew that I needed to get experience in a small school, and let's face it, I absolutely love the rural setting as well. I've heard from speaking to other principals that these rural schools give you the best preparation for going on to leading larger schools, because you're having to do the Sinkhole, writing your own charters, strategic goals, professional development, applications, and be the caretaker. I also have a teaching component. So, are you seriously the caretaker, Carolyn? We pay somebody 4 hours a week. But the other day, so if they're not there, if you have a child who's sick, you have to clean it up. The other day I was teaching, and seriously, the tap burst outside. And of course, I was on a Friday, and in fact, I was here on my own. I was like, wow. So I had to go out, put my gumboots on and go and fix a tap or put some things, some duct tape around it. So that's the reality of the role. Now, the reason I say that is that it prepares me really well for the future. But my problem with, I think my biggest worry is that these small rural schools are going to suffer hugely because you're not going to attract anybody, particularly now with these new pay scale for the teacher, that the disparity is even greater because the teacher's getting paid more. So even in 3 years, 4 years' time, I'm still on less. So it's just not. Look, I've got to say this on behalf of every principal here. We are so happy for the teachers. They deserve it. They work so darn hard, and it's necessary that they needed to have this. But what's happened is that I think a lot of the focus has gone into that, and the pot of money has gone to the larger group. Great, and the public will see that. But I think the left behind factor is that the principals, the offer that was given back to us was the same one we rejected in March. So really, there's been no movement since then. So what's happened is that as a result of this, it's just lowered. It's made it even worse. I saw a DP just off a job the other day in the Gazette, and it offered 6 to 7 units. Now that's 7 times 4 is 28K on top of 90. That's a heck of a lot more. And you accept that will always be the case, even if you get more money, that there will be teachers out there who are at bigger schools, who have got management units, who are heads of departments, that they will make more than a principal at a small country school, for example. Right. I'm not saying, I don't think it's right. So if you had your way, principals would always be paid more than teachers? Yeah. Yeah, I do. What do you reckon your colleagues will think of that, Carolyn? Principals, I'm sure they'll be supportive of it. Look, at the end of the day, only 2 years ago I was a teacher, and I know the workload is huge for teachers. But this it's massive. Okay. Are principals worth more than teachers, full stop? Look, pay-wise, yes, I do. We carry a huge burden of responsibility, and along that comes there should be remuneration. So what are you going to do? Because the offer has been rejected. Your teachers have signed on board for their offer. So where does that leave you guys?
Yeah, we're really in limbo, and I'm sure there's going to be a lot of conversations in the next 24 hours on the principal's Facebook page, although we had started before because we sort of kind of knew that this was going to be the case. It's difficult for principals. Us striking isn't going to have any impact because we're not the ones, by sending kids home. If I go off for a day striking, it's no different than me attending a principal's meeting.
But what does that tell you about the value of teachers then versus the value of principals?
I don't think it's a fair comment at all. That's part of the role. There are sometimes you have to attend things outside of school.
Okay, so if strike is not an option for you, where's your leverage?
Well, I know. Like I said, I don't have the answer for that. I'm sure there's going to be conversations coming up around that. There's discussion of, I don't really want to put things out there on the radio yet because nothing is,
now you've got me really curious, Carolyn. What's going on?
Well, look, no. Hey, look, there's nothing solid. The thing that was released from Linda Stewart was around holding back, something around, I haven't read it in great detail, but, ministry things that are required from us, maybe we help withhold, things like that. Look, I don't know. I don't have the answer yet, but I'm certainly going to get amongst it and involved and certainly cause as much, I'm going to fight the good cause, that's what I'm going to do. And I feel like it's a bit of a kick in the guts to earn less than I would have in the classroom.
And that is Carolyn Hill, who's the principal of Wharepapa South School in Waikato. It is 21 minutes after 5 and you're with Checkpoint on RNZ National. Let us know what you think on that issue. Is a principal of a small rural school worth more than a teacher at a bigger school? Who should get paid more? You can text us on 2101, tweet us at Checkpoint RNZ or email checkpoint@rnz.co.nz. A handful of votes look likely to make the difference in whether the voluntary euthanasia bill survives the night. The end-of-life choice bill is expected to have its second reading in Parliament this evening. The first reading passed 76 to 44 late last year, but this vote is expected to be a lot tighter. Here's our Deputy Political Editor, Craig McCulloch.
For David Seymour, it's been a 4-year battle, drafting legislation, campaigning, consulting, trying to win over his fellow MPs. Tonight, his end-of-life choice bill faces its toughest hurdle yet.
There'll be some people that have said they'll vote for it who won't. I'm sure there'll be others who said they won't vote for it who will.
Indeed, votes have been shifting around as late as today. Labour's Kitty Allen voted yes at the first reading. Tonight, she's decided she'll vote no.
It's been a really hard process, but this is a conscious vote. I've got to be happy to stand by what I decide, and that's where I've landed today.
But minds aren't changing just in one direction. Judith Collins from National opposed the bill last year. It now has her provisional support. And Mr Seymour says he understands there are several MPs in that same boat.
Based on what my fellow MPs are saying, I expect that it will pass, but that's cautious optimism.
The caution may well be for what comes next. Assuming the bill makes it through tonight, the next battle will be even messier. The legislation will go before Parliament for what's called the committee stage, during which MPs can attempt to make various amendments. And the National MP, Maggie Barry, perhaps the staunchest euthanasia opponent, is promising to put up a fight. She says she has about 120 amendments ready to go, a clear effort to stymie the bill's progress.
I'm not a supporter of this bill and I don't want to see it pass, and I don't think the bill is retrievable. But we will try, if it does pass tonight, to take back the worst excesses of the bill.
Significant changes will also have to be made at the committee stage to retain the backing of the Greens and New Zealand First. While both parties have promised their support tonight, that support comes with conditions. The Greens want the bill narrowed to cover only the terminally ill. New Zealand First wants a referendum.
Unlike others, we're prepared to put this to the democratic choice of the New Zealand people. We do not think these politicians, including my colleagues, are better qualified than the voters of this country.
While New Zealand First and the Greens are acting as a bloc tonight, National and Labour MPs are free to vote how they wish. Generally, they tend to be following the tilt of their leaders. Simon Bridges against, Jacinda Ardern for.
I do see this as a deeply personal decision for New Zealanders. My belief is, though, that should be a decision for them.
If tonight's reading is anything like the first one, it's sure to be emotive and fiery, and that fervour's likely only to build as the debate carries on. Atu iti whare parimata mō te hōtaka o te ahiahi, ko Craig McCulloch.
It's an impressive sinkhole under the kitchen, but not the kind you'd expect. A bubbling, steaming, belching crater has gobbled up the backyard and more of a Rotorua house, leaving its tenants shocked and homeless. Susan Gedger says she thought it was an earthquake when her whakarewarewa house shook and the earth rumbled in the wee small hours.
So I got woken up about 2 a.m. thinking, there's a few earthquakes happening here. There was a lot of shaking and jolting. And but then as time kind of went on, like 2-3 minutes passed, and I thought, well, that's a really long earthquake. It can't be right. Something's not right. So I hopped up and went to go walk into the kitchen, and then I could because you could hear it as well. And then I could kind of see like the steam all splattered over the kitchen windows and stuff, and then could really hear it. So I looked out the kitchen window and just saw a big geyser coming out from the ground from a pipe in the bank.
Did you freak out?
Yeah, I did. I just went straight into protective panic mode and got the little boy up and grabbed my baby and just thought, what can I frantically grab to get in the car and get out of here? But I thought I'll ring Peter, who works with the geothermal stuff through Rotorua Council, and I gave him a call, and he came, within a few minutes, and he said, oh, look, I think you're pretty safe. It'll be all right. We'll kind of monitor it in the morning and take it from there. He was happy that the pressure was coming out there, not under the house or anything. And then when the morning came, we kind of looked out the front door, and it had turned into like a huge mud geyser. So that was kind of spectacular but different and a little bit scary. And just as time has gone by, like every hour or just every half hour, it just kind of has turned into something like, really spectacular. It's like a huge big crater in the front lawn, and there's mud flying like probably about 10 metres into the air. And
it sounds spectacular. Can we just go back a little bit? The sound, you say it was making a noise in the early hours of the morning. What was it like?
Like a big, just so there was like big jolts and just, sometimes how you can hear an earthquake, just big bangs and stuff, knocking sounds and, rumbling, a lot of rumbling,
A lot of rumbling.
Continuously kept shaking and jolting, like the whole house and everything was kind of shaking and that. So,
was it quite violent, the movement, Susan, rather than rolling?
Some of them were, some of the jolts, the big bangs of steam pocketing up into the air and then the mud flying up and stuff, it was.
So give us a little bit of a comparison when you first see this sort of hole in the ground to what it is like now. How much has it grown in size, do you reckon?
Oh, real, tremendously. Like, it was just a big shoot of steam into the air to now like this huge mud crater. It just gets more and more spectacular and bigger, and the bank's coming away, but there's a shed that's sitting right there, and so the mud's coming away from there. So I think the shed will probably end up down the bank, but the specialists in that came and the engineers, and they just kind of said, we think you better get out of the house now because there's a sinkhole under the kitchen and it could subside at any moment.
Wow, so the house could get gobbled up?
Yeah, eventually. But that's the thing, it could stop in a minute. It could stop, like tomorrow, or it could last for like 2 weeks, but the longer it carries on, the worse the damage kind of gets. So the house won't be livable again. They'll have to, just deem it not accessible or anything, I think, after this.
Are there any other properties nearby, Susan?
Yes, there is to the right. They are okay. They can feel the jolts in that. But just again, like as long as the process goes on, it's kind of spreading along the bank and towards that house as well.
So it's kind of chewing up ground as it moves along?
Yeah. Yep, taking it away, and it's just like a big mudslide going down into the paddock below.
Well, where are you going to stay?
I've had to quickly move to my dad's. He was up north fishing, and I couldn't get hold of him, so he's had a bit of a surprise. His house is a bit of a bomb site at the moment. I've just kind of dumped stuff and gone, so... Yeah.
And how did you explain this one to him? Hey, Dad, a giant hole's just appeared in my backyard.
Yeah, I woke up to a geyser at 2 a.m. and, I've had to evacuate, and I'm homeless. I need to come live with you. Yeah.
How did you've got a baby and a little boy. What did the little boy think?
He thinks it's all pretty cool. Yeah, the mud and everything. Baby, she thinks the mud. She's all like, wow. But he's just kind of worried about where we're going to live and stuff too, because I think change kind of unsettles him a bit in that. But it's pretty amazing just seeing it all. Like, have a lot of people just sitting down there for quite a while, just watching and observing them. So are all the locals coming down for a bit of a gander, are they, Susan? Yeah. There's a lot of people. The mayor was down there just before. Had like schools down there and stuff, and just all the locals. And have you had offers of help? Yes, a lot. Yeah. I haven't had a chance to really go onto Facebook or anything this morning, but just the help and the support that I'm getting from all my clients and friends, and even the guys that are building a house next door, they all came over to help get stuff out of the shed real quickly, because we were worried it was going to end up all down the bank. And it's a real comfort. It's real neat, like in situations like this, that you can look at it as a real, downer. But I know something really good will come from this, and just moments like that, it's really, really nice, Have you had another mud pool pop up in the backyard before, or is this the first one? This has happened 4 times in the last 20 years, and I think it had to do something with them when they blocked up the bores, and that was to make the geyser bigger at Te Pui or something. I heard something along those lines, but it was just steam that would come out of the bank, and it would last for like a few days or a week or something, and then just stop. But this is the one that's going to really do the damage. That's kind of going to be the end of that property being lived in ever again. Susan Gedger, who's lost her backyard to a giant, belching, muddy sinkhole. Coming up on Checkpoint on RNZ National, Middlemore Hospital security guards are escorting staff and visitors to their cars more than 4,000 times a month following earlier assaults. And what's victim support doing with the last of the millions raised for the Mosque shooting victims? We're getting a lot of feedback from you on the principal's pay issue. Keep it coming. You can text us on 2101, tweet us at Checkpoint RNZ, or you could always send us an email, checkpoint@rnz.co.nz. Let's go to the headlines now, though, with Susanna.
A Labour MP who's had a last-minute change of heart over the end-of-life choice bill says David Seymour's changes have not satisfied her concerns. The Act Leaders Bill is due for its second reading in Parliament this evening. Kiri Tapu Allen had planned to vote for it, but says she decided not to earlier today. Mr Seymour says some MPs have changed their minds since the first reading passed by 76 votes to 44, but he's optimistic tonight's reading will pass. The State Services Minister has announced the repeal of the State Sector Act and the biggest change to the public service in 30 years. Chris Hipkins says under a new Public Service Act, boards comprising chief executives and relevant agencies will tackle the country's most pressing problems. He says with such complex challenges, a single agency no longer works, and the reform will make groups of chief executives jointly accountable. The use of security guards has soared at Middlemore Hospital since 2 nurses were attacked in the grounds earlier this year. County's Manukau DHB says guards made about 4,000 trips to escort staff in May, up from 500 in February. But some Middlemore staff are still nervous and vigilant as they leave work, saying the guards may be too far away to patrol the large car park. A Kapiti Coast councillor has been dismissed after losing his appeal against a conviction for indecently assaulting a staff member. David Scott was convicted of indecent assault a year ago and fined $1,500. He had been paid during his leave of absence, but after losing the appeal, the council's chief executive says Scott was removed from office immediately. No verdict has yet been reached in the trial of 2 cousins accused of murdering a man in Mangere last year. Abraham Tu'uheava was shot dead and his wife was severely injured in May 2018. The High Court jury in Auckland deliberated for 4.5 hours today and will resume tomorrow morning. Those are the latest headlines on RNZ National. Our next news and weather update is at 6.
Thanks, Susanna. This is Checkpoint and I'm Lisa Owen. It's about this time we go to the business news and Giles Beckford is standing by, I do believe. Giles, tell me, Fletcher Building is signalling it's venturing back into big commercial developments?
Yes, good evening to you, Lisa. No doubt a few eyebrows were raised about this development. My old mum used to say once bitten, twice shy, but clearly it doesn't apply at Fletcher Building. You remember not so long ago, just a little over a year, it was close to being brought to its knees after it had booked about $1 billion worth of losses through some big commercial projects that had gone very badly wrong. Delays, cost blowouts. You remember some of them were the convention centre in Auckland, the Justice Precinct in Christchurch, and they've also continued to report difficulties around the commercial bay development in Auckland, all of which, of course, forced them to retreat from the sector. They said, we're just going to worry about roads and tunnels and drains and the like. We're not going to get involved in chasing big high-rise projects. Clearly, they've had another think about it. They're thinking now that perhaps they've cleared a lot of their order book. They'll only have a couple of big projects going into next year. It's a source of business that they need to bolster their earnings. And from that point of view, they're venturing back into the game. They say it's a different sector and they've got a different approach to it. They are not going to be chasing any trophy job just for the sake of doing it. They're going to be far more cautious about the risk and the costs that are involved. But no doubt, shareholders will be a little bit on the sceptical side. You remember that the last lot of problems forced them to cut their costs. It cost a couple of senior executives and the chair of the board their positions. They had to sell businesses. So from that point of view, yeah, there'll be a degree of scepticism as to whether this is going to work. On the plus side for shareholders, a reaffirmation that there will be a dividend payout, and also the company's going to reinvest or going to give back some of the proceeds of the sale of those assets, $300 million worth. It will buy back its own shares. The result of that will be that it should lift the overall price of the company. We'll wait and see on that one.
Interesting times, yeah. Hey, the next one is a question of how low can we possibly go? So there's, further interest cuts on the horizon from the Reserve Bank?
I was a bit careful, a bit worried about where you were thinking on that one. Please, you said interest rates. Yes, the Reserve Bank did talk today. It did hold the cash rate steady at 1.5%. That was no surprise, remembering that it cut it in May, and that was the first move in more than a couple of years. And that cut was said to be able to give the economy a bit of a shot in the arm, get ahead of the curve of the slowdown. Well, the commentary today was pretty gloomy looking. The Doves are clearly in control of the Reserve Bank. The local outlook is looking a bit on the soggy side. Wages are slow, growth is slowing. Businesses don't want to invest. Consumers are wary about going on a big binge. The housing market's slowing, migration slowing. So you just sort of tick off all the negatives. And that's before we even look overseas, where, of course, some people would suggest that it's particularly gloomy, trade disputes and growth slowing there. The usual response, of course, is to slash interest rates, but there's not actually much to come and go on. But when you've got your cash rate at 1.5%, you've got to say how many more bucks or do you get for, how many more bangs do you get for the bucks that you expend? There's a clear signal that there'll probably be a rate cut in August. Whether the situation deteriorates to the extent that it needs another one, say November or early next year, we'll wait and see. But that does raise questions about where does the RBNZ go if the global recession really does hit the fan in a year or so's time? And that's a question which we'll have to ponder and no doubt we'll discuss at the time.
Take us for a quick spin around the markets, Giles.
Shares, they couldn't keep up the winning streak after 3 days of record closes, but it's not too much damage, just down 10 points, just above the 10,400 level for the top 50 index. On the currency front, it's all the halves. 66.5 US cents, 95.5 Australian and 52.5 British pence.
Thanks, Giles. That's Giles Beckford, who's been allowed out after dark, it appears, to do the business news for us this evening. It's a debate that's been had in many households and classrooms. How much mobile phone time should kids have? Well, in the Australian state of Victoria, phones will be banned in all state and secondary schools from next year. The move is aimed at stopping cyberbullying and distractions in classrooms. But while many parents are likely to support the move, some experts are worried it is the wrong approach. The ABC's Isabel Rowe has this report.
A At school drop-off this morning, parents were in fierce agreement about phone bans at school.
Oh yeah, I'd definitely support it. Yeah.
If she was getting public transport home or something, to have a phone on her would be... But I'd somehow hope that I could lock it.
So during school, no phone?
Yeah, no way.
They don't need to be on their phones. They need to be doing other things. There's too much distraction.
At home, Jane monitors the phone usage of her two oldest children.
The 15-year-old's the only one who has a phone. She's probably the most trustworthy. She's on social media and has been since she was 13. The 12-year-old does not have a phone because she hasn't earned it yet.
And she'd also encourage a nationwide ban on phones in schools.
I think a lot of schools are doing that sort of thing anyway. I think the schools have recognised that it does impact on actual face-to-face social time.
In New South Wales, a ban on phones in public primary schools exists, but it's up to individual high schools to decide what their students can do. Victoria is the first state to ban phones in all public schools. The move aims to reduce cyberbullying and distraction in the classroom. Children won't be allowed access to their phones between the first and last school bells starting from term 1 next year. Federal Education Minister Dan Tehan has congratulated Victoria on taking the lead.
What I would call on is other states and territories to follow Victoria's lead. This is something that I've been pushing for since I became Education Minister. It is an election commitment that we took to the last election.
The concept is already in place at McKinnon Secondary College, a public secondary school in Melbourne. It wasn't an easy transition. The school's principal is Pitzer Binion.
I think initially I thought the school community was going to implode, but we've really stuck together and been very purposeful, and I think it's been very successful. It was really about the research and how pervasive phones have become. They're so addictive, these devices.
But what the research says about bans is a point of contention. Renowned child psychologist Dr Michael Carr-Gregg reviewed phone use in schools for the New South Wales government last year, which led to that government's decision to ban phones in public primary schools. However, the review found no evidence that high school students were being harmed by using their devices during recess and lunch. Queensland Catholic school principal Andrew Oberther wouldn't support a ban in his state.
In high schools, I'm aware that children will have their phone in their lockers and are not supposed to access it during the school day. They may access it during break times, but it would be for a very brief period of time. If we ban phones, it's going to add pressure and stress to a staff member having to monitor this and take away teaching time. So I really think we need to have education at a young age without necessarily banning the device.
And that school principal, Andrew Oberther, ending that report from the ABC's Isabel Rowe. Let us know what you think of that one. Should mobile phones be banned from schools, from all schools? I know some of them do have bans, or will it, as he just said there, turn teachers into police officers, policing the use of mobile phones? And on the subject of schools, getting a lot of feedback on our interview with the principal of a small school, who says that she would be paid less than a teacher in a large school if she had accepted the latest offer to principals. This person says, read the principal of a 27-child school with 2 other teachers. If my maths is right, that's 1 teacher per 9 students, noting the principal said she also taught, and to be honest, running a school that size can't require too much non-classroom time. I'm sorry, but that just doesn't sound like the responsibility of a teacher with 30 students and additional leadership duties on top. If you want more money, get a job as a principal at a larger school or go back to teaching with a full class, says that person. Marie has got in touch also and says, of course, principals in small schools are worth more than teachers in big schools. To suggest otherwise is like saying directors of nursing in small DHBs are worth less than nurses on the wards in big DHBs. There are responsibilities and accountabilities that demand significantly greater competence and knowledge. And we'll just go with one last one that says, while I understand that principals have many other managerial responsibilities, your interviewee had a school of 27 with 2 teachers, while I, as a classroom teacher in Dunedin, have a class of 34. I'm not sure principals should always be paid more. We'll hopefully get to more of your feedback a little later. Do keep it coming. Text us 2101 or you can tweet us at Checkpoint RNZ. Security guards at Middlemore Hospital are escorting staff and visitors to their cars more than 4,000 times a month as safety fears continue. The DHB says that's an 8-fold increase since March, when 2 nurses were attacked as they left work at 7 o'clock on a weekend morning. But some staff say they're still nervous and would like more to be done. Rowan Quinn reports.
Intensive care nurse Deborah Isaac says safety is still very much front of mind for all of her colleagues.
At night it's quite terrible because it's winter at the moment, so when we're walking down it's always looking around. Before it was never like that.
The attacks were close to home. The victims were her colleagues finishing a shift in intensive care. She says at the end of a shift workmates get together now to see who's parked where so they can travel in groups. Security guards now patrol car parks, but some of the spaces are huge and in winter dark early in the evening.
Even if you're working on night shift, coming to work at 6 it's already dark. So you get out of the car and you look for the security, and sometimes you think, oh my God, I'm alone. Meanwhile, he's helping somebody else.
The county's Manukau DHB has increased the number of security guards working since March. Its figures show guards are averaging 130 trips a day with staff or visitors, an 8-fold increase since before the attacks. The DHB's General Manager of Clinical Services, Ian Dodson, says he understands staff concerns.
Our car parking sites can feel remote and quite dark late at night. Some of the unique parts of the Middlemore site, as you go up, say, Hospital Road, for example, there's no residential houses round. It can feel quite quiet up there, so there are reasons why I think people like having that security presence.
He says there have been no reports of incidents in car parks since the increase in security. Other measures put in place include more lighting and cutting back trees to increase visibility. But a nurses' union organiser, Charlene Rapato, says some nurses have been frustrated by having to wait half an hour after their long shifts for a security guard. She says nurses and other hospital staff do vital work and have a right to be safe as they leave the building.
It's a highly stressful, high intense work, and when you're leaving work at 7 o'clock in the morning, you're tired, you're exhausted, and you've got to make the trip to your car. And with the assaults that have happened recently, it doesn't bode well for confidence, so it does create anxiety.
The DHB's Ian Dodson says there can be challenges for the security guards, especially at the end of a shift when many people leave at once.
We do get occasions where they get asked to escort people well up Hospital Road and sometimes down Grays Ave beyond our current car parks, and they can then get taken away for 20 or 25 minutes at a time, and we do ask staff to be patient.
Nurse Deborah Isaac says most staff are patient when it comes to waiting, but she says even with the changes they still have their wits about them and do all they can to keep themselves safe.
We work 12 to 12-hour shifts, so at 7 to 7:30. So what happens is when we want to leave to go home, we always go in 2 or 3s. Who's parked down? I'm coming with you, I'm walking with you.
The DHB says safety improvements are continuing, including putting in more security cameras and fencing off some areas. I Tamaki Makauro mō te hōtaka o te ahiahi nei, ko Rowan Quinn tēnei.
In a world first, Facebook has agreed to hand over the identification data of French users suspected of hate speech on its platform to judges. Lisa Bernhard reports.
After successive meetings between Facebook's Mark Zuckerberg and French President Emmanuel Macron, a deal that is a world first. Reuters learned exclusively on Tuesday that Facebook has agreed to hand over data identifying French users who post hate speech on its platform to the country's judges. France's Minister for Digital Affairs, Cédric O, told Reuters, "This is huge news. It means that the judicial process will be able to run normally. They're only doing it for France." Discussions between Zuckerberg and Macron on how to best regulate tech giants began last year. The French president eager to take a leading role globally on the regulation of hate speech and the spread of false information online. It was followed by a meeting in May that coincided with a report commissioned by Macron recommending increased oversight of Facebook and an independent regulator to keep an eye on other large tech companies when it comes to hate speech. Zuckerberg commended the report, saying it could be a blueprint for the whole European Union. Prior to the New Deal, Facebook had refrained from identifying those suspected of hate speech because it was not compelled to do so under U.S.-French legal conventions and because it worried that countries without an independent judiciary could abuse it.
Lisa Bernhard reporting there. It is about 11 minutes away from 6. I'm Lisa Owen and you're with Checkpoint on RNZ National. As always, keen to hear from you about anything you've heard on the program today. You can text us on 2101, tweet us at Checkpoint RNZ or send us an email, checkpoint@rnz.co.nz. Victim Support will tomorrow tell the victims of the mosque shootings how it plans to hand out the remainder of the millions of dollars donated to them. It has faced criticism from some victims for failing to consult with them over how the $10.7 million should be divided up, with claims not enough has been given to the severely injured or those suffering mental trauma after witnessing the horrific shootings. So far, it's handed out $7 million, with the most going to the bereaved, followed by the injured and then witnesses. Tomorrow's announcement will cover how another $2.5 million will be divided up, with Victim Support promising that this time it has listened to victims. Conan Young reports.
Victim Support says it will communicate directly with the 290 people on the police victims list via a public meeting in Christchurch tomorrow before it goes public with how it will divide up its final payments. It released a statement yesterday claiming to have spoken to more than half of those affected through a series of meetings and phone calls. From those conversations, it says it's identified 3 key areas that victims want them to focus on, including giving more to those in greater need, prioritising the bereaved and severely injured, and taking into account those who have suffered mental trauma. Abdulaziz, who confronted the shooter at the Linwood Mosque and is credited with saving lives by throwing an EFTPOS machine at him, says it's a pity Victim Support didn't take this approach right from the beginning. He says the money raised should have been split evenly between the 290 victims, and prioritising some groups over others has only divided the community.
I already called Victim Support and I told them, look, by you guys doing this, you're going to cause a lot of problem among the Muslims. You're dividing them and you put a lot of division and make them enemy with each other. But they all refuse. And if they would have done the right thing, they should have done it that time.
Witnesses who have suffered mental trauma following the shootings, many of whom have still not been able to return to work, have so far only received $12,000 each from the funds raised by Victim Support, compared to $45,000 given to the bereaved and $25,000 for the physically injured. Abdulaziz says he doesn't expect tomorrow's announcement will reflect the impact the shootings have had on those who saw it unfold.
That person was inside the mosque. He's seeing people getting shot in front of him and or next to him, and he's thinking he will be the next person. And you know how much mentality damage their brain and everything, and they don't come as a victim.
An advocate for terror attack victims, lawyer Andrew O, says it's pleasing to hear the last tranche of funding will be given out based on people's individual needs. He says this should have been the approach for the second tranche of funding as well, which was instead handed out on a one-size-fits-all basis.
They should have really taken stock and at that point and said, look, how are we distributing? And if it's a needs-based, well, we need to figure that out. I mean, effectively, they're saying that now. They're saying we're looking at a needs-based system, but they've done no assessments. So I'm not entirely sure how that's going to work.
Andrew O says while it might be too late for the Victim Support money, there's still a lot of fundraise money that has yet to be distributed.
Christchurch Foundation has got, 6-7 million, I think. I'm not in, and I sort of discussed that they're in negotiation with other parties for more money. So what I'm hoping is that lessons are learnt from this process and can be picked up. But I suspect the government are going to have to stand in and provide a bit of assistance to get some of this needs assessments work done, because I don't think they can expect organisations such as the Christchurch Foundation to actually do that work.
Abdelaziz is planning to continue his fight for a fairer process. He's organising a protest outside the office of the government minister coordinating the welfare response for families, Megan Woods, on Friday. Abdelaziz isn't interested in being given any of the money himself and says he's speaking up on behalf of fellow Muslims at the Linwood Mosque, who he says deserve extra support and need to be heard. Kei o te tahi aho, mō te hōtaka o te ahi, ko Karinyang tēnei.
And to the US now, a photograph of a father and his young daughter lying dead in shallow water near the border between Mexico and Texas is causing shock around the world. The pair were discovered in the Rio Grande on the Mexican side of the border, highlighting the dangers faced by Central American migrants trying to cross into the US. Meanwhile, the US House of Representatives has approved a $4.5 billion aid package to address the migrant crisis. Record numbers of Central American families have arrived at the border seeking asylum and straining capacity at migrant shelters. The aid package will provide programs to help house, feed and transport them. It will also include new standards for migrants in custody, following reports of poor conditions facing young children in overcrowded facilities. Here's the BBC's John Sopel.
It's a nondescript government building in Clint, Texas. But beyond the unwelcoming walls, migrant children who've been separated from their parents have been sleeping on the floor without enough food to eat, according to lawyers who visited the facility. Around 300 of the children have been moved, though some have been returned. The case has caused indignation. In court, an incredulous judge questioned a government lawyer.
If you don't have a toothbrush, if you don't have soap, if you don't have a blanket, it's not safe and sanitary. Well, wouldn't everybody agree to that?
Well, I think there's fair reason to find that those things may be part of safe and sanitary.
Maybe are.
Let the children go now.
When the child separation policy came to light a year ago, there was outrage. The First Lady, Melania Trump, visited the border. The president was forced into a U-turn. But the record-keeping was so abysmal by US officials that literally thousands of children remain separated from their parents.
I'm very concerned. And they're much better than they were under President Obama, by far. And we're trying to get the Democrats to agree to really give us some humanitarian aid, humanitarian money.
There is broad support over the need to do something about the surge of migrants trying to enter the country illegally. As well as reinforcing the border wall, the administration wants to send a deterrent message. But the world's richest country keeping children in squalor with not enough to eat, well, it looks as though Congress is going to do something about it. On the southern side of the border, Mexico have deployed additional troops to slow the flow of migrants. But whether fleeing the turmoil of Venezuela or the drugs gangs of Central America, there are plenty of people willing to try their luck, irrespective of what awaits them on the other side.
John Sopel with that report. The buyer of what's thought to be the only remaining proof copy of an original Treaty of Waitangi proclamation of sovereignty says he's thrilled with the purchase. It was one of hundreds of items on sale from the Christopher Parr collection, described as one of New Zealand's finest print collections from the early to mid-1800s. The rare one-page document was sold for $31,000 to private collector Spencer Schooler at Auction House Art and Object in Auckland today. Mr. Schooler told reporter Amy Williams he considers himself a custodian and he plans to offer the document for display in museums.
Thrilled to be at the auction today. It's a very special auction. It's the first auction since I started collecting 10 years ago of this quality. The last one was the Pycroft collection, and there's some fantastic items that have been up for sale today.
And what did you buy?
I channeled all my efforts into one major piece, Hobson's Declaration of Sovereignty. So there was only one that was probably printed at the time. It was a printing error, and they claimed that New Zealand was stretched from the south all the way to the northern latitudes, and they had to correct it, and there's I think 4 known copies of the proper printing subsequent that are around. So it's a very rare, and it also came with a letter asking me to quickly print it, which probably caused the error in the first place. So what I've done, I've also got a bilingual printing of the Treaty of Waitangi, which I lend to the Waitangi Museum, and I'll talk to them to see if they're also interested in having that piece, because I'd much rather lots of people see it than just myself.
What do you think about that price? I mean, 31,000.
I thought I'd have no chance. I thought an institution would definitely buy it. I thought Alexander Turmer would buy it because they're very good at buying all the things, but they dropped out at 26,000. So it's quite rare, and obviously it'll come on the market, probably when I pass away. But yeah.
And so you're planning to. Is it like a gift or
when you
loan it, or what would you call that?
When you're holding an item, you're looking at after on behalf of New Zealand to then pass on and safeguard. So it's not really yours. It's just something you're holding on to as a vital something to then pass on to the future.
Why is it important to you to own this?
Why? It's understanding your history and understanding where you come from, and understanding where New Zealand comes from, and supporting New Zealand and what's important.
And that was Spencer Schooler. Just before the 6 o'clock news on the subject of primary principals' pay negotiations, M's been in contact saying, I'm amazed to hear there is still a school with 25 pupils. 27, I think it was actually, M, which was a principal we interviewed earlier in the program. After 6, we're going to have more on that debate. The key question being, should principals be paid more than teachers?
RNZ News at 6. Ngā mihi nui ko Susana Leata tēnei. David Seymour has tried to quash criticism of his end-of-life choice bill before its second reading in Parliament. In the first of 12 speeches by MPs scheduled before the reading, the ACT leader told the House a short time ago that the bill has been 4 years in the making and has been the subject of the most rigorous consultation in Parliament's history. He rejected the concern that if it becomes law, it will lead to further suicide.
People have said, for instance, that assisted dying being legalised can lead to suicide contagion. There is no evidence for that claim, and those that have hijacked such a sensitive topic in this country with no evidence, I believe should be seriously considering how they approach political debate in the future.
The ACT leader and Epsom MP David Seymour. The Education Minister Chris Hipkins says primary and intermediate school principals have turned down a good deal. The Educational Institute announced today that its members have rejected the government's offer to principals but accepted the one for teachers. The union says principals want higher pay rates for those in charge of small schools and pay parity with secondary school principals. Mr Hipkins says the government can reconfigure its offer, but it won't be adding any more money.
We're not putting any extra money on the table for that, and we were very, very clear about that, and we were also very clear when we went through the discussions several weeks ago that the extra money we were putting on the table for pay parity, we were doing that on the basis that that was the final deal, so we'll be sticking with that.
Chris Hipkins says he's disappointed principals did not accept the offer. No verdict has yet been reached in the trial of two cousins accused of murdering a man in Mangere. Abraham Tu'uheava was shot dead and his wife was severely injured in May last year. The High Court jury in Auckland, which deliberated for 4.5 hours today, will resume tomorrow morning. Annika Smith reports.
Fesilau Tapaivalu and Mesui Tufui have pleaded not guilty to murder and attempted murder, while a third man, Viliame Tani, has admitted the charges. The court has heard the killing may have been a hit ordered by the Comancheros in Australia over bad blood between the gang and Mr Tu'uheava, a Nomads member. The Crown's case is that all three men worked together to execute the killing, and the defendants are now lying about their involvement. Mr Tapaivalu says he was there that night but didn't know about the plan and fell asleep in the car, while Mr Tufui says he was never there. Atuiti ko te mātua ko Annika Smith aho.
A Christchurch lawyer says he is sceptical of Victim Support's plans to distribute the last of the donated money to those affected by the March 15th attacks. To date, only $12,000 has been given to each witness, compared to $45,000 for the bereaved and $24,000 to the injured. Victim Support is meeting with those affected tomorrow morning and will start distributing most of the remaining $3 million of the $10.7 million raised. It says the final payments will prioritise the bereaved and severely injured and take mental trauma into account. Andrew O, an advocate for terror attack victims, says the individual needs of each victim have not been assessed and he remains unsure how Victim Support will decide who gets what. According to new research by Auckland's Economic Development Agency, the number of construction jobs in the city is set to grow by 70% over the next decade. That's another 56,000 jobs. Professional services such as accounting, law, engineering and management consulting are all forecast to grow as well. The agency's General Manager, Pam Ford, says the future of work may not be under as much threat from automation as previously thought.
What we found is that while technological disruption is happening, and it's happening now, the actual growth in jobs in Auckland will be largely due to the continued population growth. So that's where you get the construction numbers and you get health and education. So the future of work is more human than it probably ever has been.
Pam Ford of ATED. Indigenous people from around the world have gathered in Waikato for what's being called an historic conference. People were welcomed today to the Native American and Indigenous Studies Association conference hosted by the University of Waikato. 2,000 people are expected to attend presentations and discussions over the next 4 days. The university's Deputy Vice-Chancellor Māori, Sarah Jane Tiakiwai, says the conference's kaupapa is about preserving and fighting for Indigenous traditions and rights. A Wellington City Councilor says people living in the eastern suburbs need major roading improvements now, not in a decade. The council has endorsed the Let's Get Wellington Moving programme, which aims to unlock congestion in the city. Sarah Free says traffic between the eastern suburbs and the central city is a huge problem. She says it took her 40 minutes to get to the council meeting, a drive that normally takes 15.
It's just soul-destroying to sit in that much traffic and to be taking that long and to know that your car's puffing out all those emissions. Look, my only concern about Let's Get Welly moving is it's possibly not moving fast enough.
Sarah Free says the focus should be on walking, cycling and public transport first before addressing congestion at the Basin Reserve and digging a second Mount Victoria tunnel, both of which are about a decade away. Dunedin's water treatment plant was evacuated this afternoon after fluoride spilt while the plant was being cleaned. Fire and Emergency and St John were called to the Mount Grand plant in the city's west shortly after 2 o'clock. The council says the spill was minimal and will not affect the water supply. A volcano has erupted in the Papua New Guinea province of West New Britain and villages nearby have been evacuated. Steve Saunders of the Rabaul Volcanic Observatory says Mount Ulawan spewed ash 13,000 metres into the air when it blew this morning. He says much of the ash is being blown out to sea. And that brings us to 6:06. Unbeaten, New Zealand can secure their semi-final spot at the Cricket World Cup with victory over Pakistan in Birmingham tonight. However, coach Gary Stead says they're not getting ahead of themselves and focusing on the playoffs yet.
We just want to keep playing each game and hopefully get a W next to it at the end of the game and keep improving. But the next couple of weeks, that's what it's all going to be about, is where people finish and who people play. But to be honest, I just want to keep taking each game at the time at the moment, and we'll work out who we play when that time comes.
Tonight's game is set to start at 9:30. The Warriors Rugby League club are staying tight-lipped about reports they've thrown big money at Brisbane prop Matt Lodge. Hooker Carl Lawton added 2 years to his contract today, a day after the signing of Rising Roosters second rower Josh Curran. The club have also reportedly offered a hefty sum to Lodge. The Broncos powerhouse is said to be considering several offers, although Auckland may appeal because his partner's father is Warriors recruitment boss Peter O'Sullivan. And another New Zealand basketballer has been selected to play in the NBA Summer League. Fresh from helping to win the US men's college title with Virginia, centre Jack Salt has been confirmed as part of the Phoenix Suns roster. On Monday, the Breakers forward Finn Delaney was named in the Dallas Mavericks squad. The Summer League starts on July the 6th. That's the news.
Tonight on Nights, teenager Maya Mariner talks about her social enterprise, Lazy Sneakers, giving old shoes new life before giving them out for free. Sir Julian Beresford-King from the EU and Green MP Goris Garaman on turning the Christchurch call on terror and the internet into practical action. And the historian Gary Morrison talks about sex in classical Rome. Pretty lousy unless you're a male citizen. On Nights of me, Brian Crump, after the news at 7 on RNZ National.
Now the short forecast from Met Service to midnight tomorrow. For Northland and Coromandel Peninsula, mainly fine. However, a few showers in Northland spreading to Coromandel Peninsula tomorrow. Auckland to Wellington, including Bay of Plenty and Central High Country and Wairarapa. Fine weather, a few areas of morning and evening cloud. Gisborne and Hawke's Bay, cloudy periods, isolated showers tonight, north of Wairoa, gradually clearing from the south with fine weather tomorrow. Fiordland and Southland, a few showers about the coast, mainly fine inland. For the remainder of the South Island, fine for most areas, but a few areas of morning and evening low cloud or fog about valleys and basins. Chatham Islands, mostly cloudy, a few light showers until this evening. You're with RNZ National. It's coming up to 9 minutes past 6.
Thanks, Susanna. This is Checkpoint and I'm Lisa Owen. The great pay battle might be all over for primary school teachers, but principals are fighting on. They've rejected the latest government offer, holding out for pay parity with secondary principals and higher salaries for those at the helm of the smallest schools. Their union, the Educational Institute, says principals of schools with fewer than 100 children should be paid as much as those with between 100 and 150. Iona Holstead is the Secretary for Education and joins us now. Good evening.
Tēnā koe, Lisa.
One of the key questions here is a principal of a small school worth more than a teacher at a larger one? What do you think?
I think it's important to talk about leadership. So in the schooling sector in New Zealand, there's always been the notion of leadership, principalship leadership, but there's also distributed leadership. So across the whole system, there are a whole lot of teachers who carry leadership responsibilities but aren't principals. So the pay system has always allowed for that, and in the last few decades has paid units to those people who hold leadership roles. But having said that, in the main, principals do get paid more than teachers. But can I give you an example? Because you spoke to Carol Lynn earlier, I think.
Yes, correct.
And she referenced some figures she'd seen on a website, and I'm not entirely sure which website she was looking at. But let me just explain. She had, if she had accepted the offer, she would have gone from the 88,000 she's on now to between 100 and 109,000 in 3 years, right? So around a $15,000 pay increase for a principal with 27 students and 2 staff. By comparison, a teacher with leadership responsibilities in a large school, for example, 600 students, could be on 101,000. So these things are relative. They're just not relative necessarily in terms of positional.
So do they just have to suck it up? The principals of smaller schools, is that what you are saying, that they just need to accept they're a smaller school, they have less responsibility than perhaps a teacher who's in a management role in a larger school, and that is just the way it's going to be?
What I can tell you is that the pay system has forever been based on the numbers of students. I'm not saying that's necessarily the right basis for it, but that is how our system currently operates. And if we were to move away from that system, and the unions haven't invited us to do that, that would be a massive shift in the system. And that's something actually that over time would be really worth working on with the unions. And that's one of the reasons we set up this accord, because it gives us a place to have those big conversations.
If that's not on the table at the moment, how will you, under the current regime, how will you attract principals to those smaller, harder to staff areas, those little schools? Because we are being told that there is a leadership crisis in small schools. So how are you going to get them there unless you bump up their pay?
Well, we have bumped up their pay. And
more,
we have,
because they don't like what's on the table, do they?
Well, sorry, let me finish. The offer that we have made and has been rejected actually puts the smaller schools getting more money. So they get a 13% pay rise. And as I say, by the end of the contract, nobody will be getting paid less than $100,000.
I do understand that. Iona, I'm sorry to interrupt you, but I do understand that. The point is they have looked at that offer and they still say it's not enough.
So we've said there's 3 other aspects to the offer which are really important and which have hardly been touched on. The first is that immediately upon settlement, they get a $1,500 payment. And in every small school where previously there was only one principal and no teacher, we have guaranteed that we will pay for an additional full-time teacher aide so that those principals are not alone. Now, that was a significant issue raised by the union. They wanted more than that, but that was what we were able to give them.
Yeah, and they still want more. So is there any more money? Because they're fully aware of all these. They're fully aware of all these clauses that you were talking us through, but they've looked at them all and they don't like it. They want more. So are you going to find some more money for them?
No.
You said that before and you did find more money.
The more money that was found last time was to meet the pay parity issue on the basic scale, and the union was offered that, and it was clear at the time that that was all there was. Nothing has changed since then.
Isn't the problem that you kind of cried wolf? You said there was no money, then you found some, so now they expect you to do the same, find some more money.
They may well expect that, but what I'm telling you is that that's not what is on offer.
So what is the pay gap between primary and secondary principals at the moment? The union says it's about 2%. Do you think that's fair?
Well,
do you agree with that figure?
I haven't done that work, to be honest, because what we've agreed with the unions is that we will look through the accord at the extent to which a unified pay system relates to principals. And we've agreed, to the extent that it's possible outside of the contract, that it will be a matter for future discussion, and that's written down in hard letters.
And that's the problem for them, that it's a future discussion. So they're interested in the here and now. So what would it cost, that 2% gap? What would it cost you to close that right now?
I haven't got that figure on me.
Shouldn't you?
And I haven't
because of the fact that it's a sticking point?
No, because it's not an area that we're going to engage on. We can repackage within the envelope we have. And if we could find 2% within that package, then we could address it.
So you've got
we need to go back to the negotiating table to do that. I can't do that on radio.
Right. So there's no more money. You're not willing to close that pay gap immediately, and you think that they're getting the smaller principals of smaller schools. You think that you've done a good job with that pay offer. Stalemate, isn't it? That's it.
Well, I would invite the union to come back. Where do you see the way forward? Where do you see the way forward? Where is there some leeway here? Lisa, that is the purpose of negotiation, is to find the way forward. What I'm saying is...
Have you got any ideas where that is, though?
Yes, I do have, but those are things that I prefer to share with the union.
Could you not just share a small element of it with us?
No, I've no intentions of doing that, Lisa, and I'm sure you wouldn't expect me to.
OK, so when do you expect to get around the table with them?
Well, that's something we haven't discussed with the union yet, but I would imagine sometime next week.
All right. Appreciate your time this evening. That's Iona Holstead, who is the Secretary for Education there, talking about, well, the standoff really with the primary principals over their pay. Let's go now to Parliament, where MPs are set to vote in the next few hours on the second reading of David Seymour's end-of-life choice bill, which would allow a doctor to give lethal injections to people requesting euthanasia. At the first reading, MPs voted it through 76 to 44, and this time round there's still a small number of MPs that are undecided. If those MPs vote the way they did last time, the bill would pass 70 to 50, but some MPs say they're concerned that the bill's provisions don't protect the vulnerable from abuse. Labour MP Kiri Allen voted in favour last time but has now changed her mind over those concerns, and we're hoping to speak to her shortly. Whereas National MP Judith Collins, who voted against the bill at the first reading, will now vote in favour of it, and she is on the line now. Good evening, Judith.
Good evening, Lisa.
What changed your mind?
Well, it's been troubling me all year. I've been very concerned that from instances of other people's family members who have died in appalling situations, that what I had always thought was available to people, which was to request morphine plus more morphine because of pain, wasn't always going to be available to them. And the other thing is, Lisa, this bill has been, this reading tonight is just a vote to get it through to what's called a committee stages of the whole House. And the Select Committee has been looking at this for, I think, around about 4 years in total. The bill has not had the substantive changes made by the Select Committee that you'd normally expect would be made to deal with the concerns about coercion, all sorts of concerns that people would rightly have. And that seems to have been more to do with the committee rather than what submitters wanted. This bill, I think, deserves to go to the next stage of getting the changes made that David Seymour has shown me that he wants to make to the bill. And these have been drafted along by Parliamentary Counsel's Office so that they are done absolutely correctly.
Okay, well, let's look at some of that issue, Judith, because obviously you'd be aware some legal experts say, and there's a growing list of concerned lawyers who say that it doesn't protect, as it stands, doesn't protect vulnerable older people from coercion. Judith Ablett-Clerc, QC, well known, highly respected, says it's a real issue when you've got vulnerable people. Grant Illingworth, QC, raised similar concerns. You're a lawyer. Do you share those concerns?
Well, that's why I'm concerned to make sure that the bill gets to the stage where those coercion issues can be addressed properly. And as I said, if the Select Committee had been acting in the way in which Select Committees normally act, they would have been put into the bill at that stage. This is something that's always concerned me, and it's why I've always previously voted against any form of euthanasia on the basis of the coercion factor. And the changes that David Seymour showed me, and which he has not yet got into the bill, and Parliament needs to put those in, I believe would go a long way towards addressing them. I have said to him that I will not guarantee a vote in the third reading unless those changes are made, unless I'm satisfied that they will deal with that adequately. But the playing politics over this, or using the Select Committee process to stymie very sensible and decent changes that many people would think were right, I think is disappointing, and I'm not quite sure how that happened, but I am happy to do my bit to help get that remedied.
Is your colleague Maggie Barry playing politics with this?
Well, I don't know. I'm sure she's not. I think it's very important, though, that people understand these votes are the worst possible votes when it comes for members of Parliament, because this is our very raw, very real beliefs. And I'm sure Maggie Barry is showing her very real beliefs. My beliefs is that I felt a lot better about this decision after I'd made the decision and phoned David Seymour in the weekend, having first checked from some members of the committee just why the changes weren't made, or as best as they could tell me. And I felt a lot better about the decision, which was to vote for this bill at this stage and to help make it a better bill if it goes forward.
Yeah, but your colleague says it can't be fixed. Maggie Barry says it can't be remediated.
Well, that's her. Yeah, but Lisa, that's her personal view. And we're all colleagues in Parliament when it comes to conscience votes. I mean, there will be people in every party voting various ways, particularly within Labour and National, because we have very free votes. And my view is, I don't take any of these things personally, but my personal experience in terms of, what other people say, but other members of Parliament say, but my personal experience as someone who held my father's hand 25 years ago as morphine was surging through him and he passed away from cancer. Not everyone has that experience. He was someone who was given a decent death because he was lucky enough to go into a hospital where he said, I've got a lot of pain, I need morphine. And his family, including me, were there able to say, yes, please give our dad the morphine he needs. And within a day, he had passed away, having already said goodbye to everybody and at no stage losing his dignity. I am appalled by some of the terrible things that happen to people. People shouldn't have to go through that.
Judith, I think Kiri Allen is on the line as well. Let's bring her into the conversation. Kiri, you have changed your mind on this as well, so you're a no this time round, yeah?
Yeah, I am, Lisa, and I just want to acknowledge the thing that Judith has just said as well. Look, I think for all parliamentarians this has been an issue. We are dealing with matters of life and death, and I think I want to acknowledge the diligence that members across the House have shown in terms of their consideration for these, these really tough, tricky issues. For me, I have changed from a yes at that first reading to a no. And for me, I think where I landed, and look, there's things that happen in our personal lives and that make you consider. And we've got some challenging decisions, perhaps that Judith has just been through in my own family. But where I sort of landed, and it has been a line ball call, is I just, at the moment, I don't feel that the piece of legislation that we've been asked to vote on tonight has really thought through the implications in terms of those that are most vulnerable within our communities. And I had some serious hesitations. And when I made my decision at that first reading, I said, well, I'll vote yes, and let's let it go through the select committee process. Let's see what the bill is that comes back to us before the House, and I'll make a considered decision then. My key concern at that time was around those that are most vulnerable, those that need a bit of protection, and making sure that law is going to be robust. I understand Mr Seymour has drafted an SOP, and I've read that, and I think it goes some part towards addressing some of the concerns.
Right.
But that's not the SOP that we've been asked to vote on tonight.
So, Kitty, the thing is, I mean, Judith has mentioned the fact that she is going to vote for it this time round so that she can see the changes and she can see if it comes up to a level that she is comfortable for. She's not committing to supporting at the third reading. You could do the same, couldn't you? You could just let it play out and then make your final decision after all the changes are made.
Yeah, and I think essentially, I think I probably went through that process at the first reading. It was like, look, okay, this is the bill that's for us. Let it go through. Let's get the feedback. Let's read the research. Let's look at what's happened internationally, and see where things land at the second reading. And I vacillated, and I have, in terms of my position, because I'm not anti-euthanasia. I'm not, but I am very much concerned about ensuring that those that may not want this piece of legislation or this choice to impact them personally, I want to make sure that they are being protected. And look, yes, I could send it off and let it go through the Committee of the Whole. And if that's the will of Parliament tonight, I've said, and I've been open about this, whatever comes back to us at that third reading, again, I'll go through the same process and assess it. The bill that is before us in the House, I'll vote on what that bill is and make my considerations at that time. But for me, of the utmost importance is just that our vulnerable people in our communities are protected.
Judith, can I bring you back in here?
Sure.
Do you think that we're having a factual debate about this, that that's a factual debate going on in the House, or are people running amok with emotion?
Nothing wrong with running amok with emotion, Lisa, on issues like this. I think, look, I respect everyone's views on this. I know how people take this issue incredibly seriously, but it's also, I think, that what I would say to Kerry, I respect her. She's a very, very diligent member of Parliament, and I think she's got a great future ahead of her. It's that David Seymour's changes could have gone through the Select Committee, but for some reason they didn't. And that's not a criticism of anybody, but what it is, it's a reality. Look,
someone's responsible for the changes not going through the Select Committee, aren't they? So who?
Well, I'm not on the Select Committee, so I don't know. But what I do know is that I and others have an opportunity to give these changes a fair go and to go to that next stage. I mean, it takes a long time for legislation in the normal course of events, not always, but in the normal course, to go through Parliament. And I just think that nothing's more emotional than these issues. And that's, since I've been in Parliament, this issue has come up on numerous occasions, and this is the first time I have felt compelled to vote for it, and that is because I think the changes that David Seymour wants to make, and if we let him make them, it will make a better piece of legislation that will provide protection for the vulnerable people.
Thank you to you both. We've got to leave it there. That's Judith Collins and Kitty Allen, who have both changed their views on that piece of legislation. Now to Lumsden, where a fourth baby has been born outside a primary birthing unit in a fast labour with no pain relief. The Southern District Health Board downgraded the Lumsden Maternity Centre to a hub where babies are only delivered in emergencies, and that's They did that in April, I believe it was. Since then, there have been 3 emergency births, including one in a roadside ambulance and another in the car park outside the hub. Each of the mothers planned to travel more than an hour away to primary birthing units, but either were diverted to Lumsden or never arrived on time. Otago Southland reporter Tess Brunton reports.
It was just after 11 a.m. when community midwife Nikki Peeling was asked to provide backup for a birth in Lumsden. She arrived in 40 minutes, and less than half an hour later the baby was born. The mother had planned to give birth at a hospital more than an hour away in Invercargill. Nikki Peeling says she needed an emergency caesarean section for her first pregnancy, but hoped to give birth naturally.
It's safer to do that at a secondary hospital, at a base hospital, rather than in the primary unit. Because if anything should go wrong in the labour or the birth, the chances are quite small, but there is always a risk because you've got a uterus that's got a scar on it. Nobody knows how that's going to behave under the pressure of a labour.
In this instance, a second midwife arrived in time to support the mother and provide backup to the lead midwife, unlike the other recent births in Lumsden. Before the downgrade from a primary birthing unit in the town, nitrous oxide gas was available for mothers giving birth. Today, Miss Peeling says the mother had nothing to ease her pain.
Well, just when she arrived, she came into the birthing room with Sarah, and sitting right next to the bed was a big tank. And she said, "Oh my God, that's great, I've got gas," because it was quite sore, but actually it was just oxygen. Since the DHB have taken over, we haven't got access to that anymore, so there was no pain relief for her, really.
But Nikki Peeling says the emergency births are not a surprise. Midwives in the area warned the Southern DHB that this could happen. In the first 6 months of 2018, 15 women had their babies within 30 minutes of arriving at Lumsden when it was still a birthing unit.
You know, they keep telling us that we need to plan better and the women need to, move earlier. But it's like, this is what happens when you live a long way away from any unit you're trying to get to when you're having a baby. Having to move and drive for an hour and a half is just not funny. And yes, I am very, very concerned because there is no emergency backup.
Southern District Health Board Chief Executive Chris Fleming says in a statement, maternal and child hubs are not intended as planned places of birth. He says the DHB plans to look closely into the number of recent unplanned births around Lumsden. The Southern District Health Board's decision to downgrade the centre may be investigated, following a petition submitted to the Health Select Committee. The committee was expected to make its decision today, but it's been delayed until the committee next meets near the end of July. Until then, the fate of the former maternity centre remains in limbo. For Checkpoint, Tess Brunton, Tēnei.
And that's all we've got time for tonight. Back again tomorrow.
RNZ News headlines at 6:30. And the first of 20 speeches before tonight's